Good evening. I'm calling the November 28th meeting of the Council's Finance Committee to order and announcing that you are being audio and video recorded. So welcome to the first of two budget listening sessions hosted by the Finance Committee. The second one will be tomorrow night at the same time, 6 p.m. also by Zoom. The Finance Committee has just a couple of very brief agenda items that we will and then we'll be ready to hear from our community. So let's get to those. We need a roll call to begin.
Sure. Councilor Maori.
Here.
And Councilor Labarge, has not yet joined us, but is expected momentarily. Councilor Moulton.
Here.
And Councilor Nash.
Here.
Okay, so we have a quorum. Okay, so roll call. And so we have some minutes I see I read over. Can I have a motion?
Move to approve the October 11th minutes.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Sure. Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
And Councilor Nash.
Yes.
Okay, so those were our only two agenda items. So back to why we're here. I'm thrilled to see folks here. As I said, this is the second year the Finance Committee has held this. I think I can speak for the entire Finance Committee in saying that we found last year's listening session fruitful and illuminating. I know we all held on to the priorities that you members who spoke with us or contacted us. We held on to those throughout the entire budget season. I know I did. And so, you know, the city's official public budget process doesn't really kick off until January. And then after that, the mayor holds a joint meeting with city council and school committee to give us kind of a preliminary broad strokes about how the city is faring financially. And then in April, there's the capital improvement budget process. And then in May, we get the big binder, the publishing of the city's proposed budget with the mayor's budget message included and the breakdown of expenditures by department. And soon after that, the council does hold 2 nights of public hearings on the budget. The whole process culminates in June when the proposed budget is brought to council for approval. I say all that because the idea behind holding listening sessions for the public this early on is to basically interrupt the trend of city government potentially not hearing from community members until, really late in the process. So, I know we desire to have your priorities, your wishes, and your concerns accompany us from the beginning. So that's why we're doing it so early and doing it now. So thank you in advance for taking the time to join us. If you'd like to make a comment or share an idea or a concern, just please raise your virtual hand and I will call on folks in that order. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes and please make sure your comments, yes, we are hoping that they will pertain to the budget. So we will track these comments and themes and we will we'll share them with the mayor's office and with full council. And if they involve the school budget, then we will share them with the school committee and the superintendent. And also thanks to our finance director, Charlene Nardi, for graciously agreeing to join us tonight. Council members and Director Nardi may periodically respond to kind of answer clarifying questions, but we are not here to kind of debate or talk, really. We are truly here to listen. So let's get started. Thanks. See about hands. I see Andrea Agito. Let me see if I can unmute you.
Rachel.
Yes.
Could I offer to do that quick vote?
Yes, right. I was
Before
talking.
we get to Andrea, and I
Oh,
just
right.
want to apologize for this. So upon the recommendation of Attorney Seawald, he is requesting that that we, as a finance committee, make decide to allow the chair to run this meeting with her discretion around people actually speaking to the topic of the budget. It's just a safeguard to empower the chair to make those decisions. We had a meeting last night, a legislative matter around how to address disruption, and that this meeting is on the budget, and that I'd like to make a motion that the chair has the power to decide whether or not somebody is on the topic of the budget this evening.
Second.
Okay, excellent. So the motion is on the floor. Any discussion? I feel like that was a good explanation.
Well, thank you.
And I was talking pretty fast, so it was hard to get a word in edgewise. But yeah, is there any discussion on that motion before we vote on it?
I just want to say, generally, I think this is implicit in the
Yeah.
powers of the chair of anybody who's running one of our meetings. It's just that for the current circumstances that we're trying to navigate, that having it clear at the start of the meeting seems to make some sense. So
that sounds good. Okay, so maybe I'll say more emphatically that we request that your comments pertain to either the budget or the budget process. So back to Andrea. Good evening, Andrea. Could you just say,
we need to vote.
Oh, we didn't vote. We had all the, yes. I'm so anxious to hear from Andrea. All right, let's vote.
Me too.
Okay, Councillor Moulton,
Yes.
Councillor Nash,
Yes.
and Councillor Maori.
Yes, yes. Okay. Hi, Andrea. I think, let me see if I unmuted you. Uh-oh. Yeah, there you are. Should be good to go.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. Hello. I would first like to thank all of you on the committee for hosting these listening sessions. I think it is a wonderful thing. And I think what you mentioned earlier about doing it early in the budget season is really a great idea and very helpful. So thank you all for taking the time to hear what we have to say. And my name is Andrea Agito. I live in Florence, and I am I am a kindergarten teacher at Ryan Road Elementary School, and I am the president of the Northampton Association of School Employees. And so, as you may guess, I'm here to talk about our schools in the budget. I know that our school department budget is probably the biggest percentage of the city budget. And I would like to just say that, as you all know, our schools are a huge part of what makes our city wonderful. They're the reason that people want to move here. They're the reason that people want to build houses in Northampton. And I see lots of new houses getting built every time I drive around town. And we depend on our city to keep them great. And the way that needs to happen is by prioritizing our schools in the budget. Our state and our city have underfunded our schools for well over a decade, and we need to make that right. Our employees and our caregivers are committed to lobbying the state for increased funding. I'm not sure if you all are aware, but last year we took a bus to the State House and spoke with our representatives to increase funding in a fair way and relooking at the funding formula that funds our schools. And I know that there are some bills on the agenda for this session that would help in that. But in the meantime, we are depending on our city to help fill those gaps until that funding comes. Last year, the mayor supported our schools by adding additional funding to stop what would have been crippling budget cuts. This year, she wants that funding back. Gone are the days when 3 or 4% increase in the school budget is enough to give our children what they need. The cost of educating a child, just like the cost of everything that we are paying for, is going up exponentially. Our schools cannot sustain the cuts that are potentially on the horizon. If the city doesn't adequately fund our schools and invest in our children, we will have much larger problems. So I'm asking you to please prioritize our schools as you are thinking about and creating a budget. Look at what inflation has been and think about the increases that are happening and whether those would be enough to sustain the services that are in our schools and increase the services for many of the increased needs that our students have as we are recovering from a pandemic and as we are starting to rebuild so much that was lost over the last few years. So I would really like to implore all of you to continue to think about our schools in the budget process and know that 4% is really not enough in what we need. And it's actually being proposed, it will end up being less than 4% if the mayor is taking back the 1.2 million that was added to the budget last year. So it's actually going to be a smaller increase. And as you all know, what inflation looks like, these cuts would be crippling for our schools because there's not a whole lot of fluff. There's not anything that can be cut that wouldn't impact our children. So I thank you for your time.
Thank
and I'm
you.
happy to answer any questions or talk with any of you anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. That was perfect timing. I don't know what I said earlier because at council we have 2 minutes, but what I announced for this meeting was 3, and you were right on the dot. But just for other speakers, it's a minute longer because we found last year people sometimes brought like proposals and ideas and a little more time. So thanks, Andrea. I really appreciate that. And okay. It's like professional public speakers now. Let's see. I see Robert. Let's see.
Good evening.
Good evening. Robert, could you just say your address of some sort, your city or town, or if you want to tell us?
Well, the only address I have is 127 Hinckley Street in Florence.
Got it.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm speaking to you tonight wearing 2 metaphorical hats. One hat is the somewhat tired, beat-up hat worn by a retired person on a fixed income. The other metaphorical hat is a fancier one, and it was one worn by a former municipal finance officer who wrote financial planning guidelines and who negotiated with Standard & Poor for bond rates and city ratings. So wearing these two hats, I wish to say tonight that it is my opinion that tax overrides to remedy structural budget deficiencies is not sustainable or good financial planning for a city. Tax overrides should be reserved for essential capital projects like schools. Free cash, sustainability fund balances are the places we should go first to look to balance structural deficiencies in a budget. Further, in order to give some relief to residents who've bought homes, as you mentioned, and built homes in this city, as I have, where I used to work, we very successfully used the residential exemption and the split tax rate structure. There's lots of ways to do that, and it would be my recommendation that we again visit those strategies, particularly the residential exemption. There are those who would say that using a residential exemption puts added pressure on rental rate structures. That's not been my experience. rental rate structure pressure comes from a function of supply and demand. If we do all we can to create new rental opportunities, the council could then consider using a residential exemption to give some relief to those of us that have to pay property tax, and mine's gone up a bunch. Added to the water rate, the water bill issue, I really do urge the council to take another peek at what we might be able to do to support those of us that have invested in Northampton by building and buying homes. Thank you for this opportunity. It's great that you're doing it. And I'd be pleased to speak with anybody about this later.
Hey, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any hands. Let's just make sure, because I'm just going to scan. I see. Okay, I see Gwen. Let me find Gwen. Okay, Gwen, I've unmuted you. You have the
Thank you.
floor. Hi, good evening.
Hi, I hesitated to talk because I heard your instructions at the beginning that you're going to take input and bring it to the school committee. So
That's okay.
I'm glad that I heard some of the input, especially from Andrea Gito about her concerns about the budget. I have concerns as well. My concerns for those of you who don't know, my name is Gwen Agna. I worked in the schools since 1987 and retired in 2020. So I have some experience with different mayors and different budgets, some overrides along the way, and different finance managers in our district. We also had Susan Wright before she became the city side, and now Christine, I know you're holding that office. I think what I'm concerned about, and just want to make sure that as we proceed in this journey of trying to figure out how to meet the needs of all the city, including our schools, is that we do so very transparently and we do so collaboratively. When I was running for re-election for school committee, there was some discussion amongst those who came to different events about how we haven't really had an opportunity as school committee to get together with city councilors, except in January when we have that sort of formal meeting, which isn't conducive to dialogue or discussion. It's more of a presentation. And I'm hopeful that we can find ways to have a dialogue. I know we have open meeting law and all that we have to be careful about, but I really don't want the situation to emerge that we are in adversarial positions with the schools versus the city, or ways of understanding where revenues are and where revenues can be available to the schools. I agree completely with Andrea Gito that we have some very high needs in our district, and we are facing some significant challenges around making sure that we can meet those needs. And I think Northampton's no different from many districts now across the country because of the pandemic and because of the just the uncertainty in the world, our climate and everything. And I think that we're all in a situation where we're feeling high anxiety. But the last thing I would hope is that we would get divided on that. I think the country is so divided, and I'm concerned that our city has a potential to be that way too. Having lived here since 1984, I'm not a HAMP person because I wasn't born and raised here, but I have been here a long time, and my kids grew up here and they went through the public schools. I'm completely devoted to our public schools and making them continue to be the best that they can be. And I just hope that we can find ways to have some collaboration and dialogue with the city so that it isn't seen as schools versus the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. Oh, okay. I see Heather Brown. I'm going to unmute you. I have this persnickety mouse. Laura, can you try to unmute her? I have an old mouse. Can you do it? Oh, no. Yes. We can hear you now, Heather.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
And
welcome.
thanks for taking the time to listen. I'm Heather Brown. I live in Florence, and you can see on my name tag here, I am the vice president of the Northampton Association for School Employees. I'm also a teacher at the high school, as I've been for the past 26 years. And I just wanted to ask if someone could explain, because I wonder this every year since we started doing it, how the determination is made about what amount we need to put in the fiscal stability fund, and how do you get to that number in terms of wanting to get that AAA bond rating. It might be too complicated math to just say, but I'd really love it if someone could explain it to me so that we could understand the city's position in terms of how much they want to save or need to save in that fund versus how much can be allocated to the determined needs of all the city departments.
Okay. I'll enlist Director Nardi unless you have anything else you wanted to add. We can come back to you too if she, because you didn't speak for very long. But let me just see if she's there because she had multitasking. She is. So Director Nardi, did you get that question? I can repeat it. Okay.
So the question, as I understood it, was how do we decide what amounts go into our reserve funds? One of them being the fiscal stability fund. The city has a policy that when the undesignated fund balance is certified by the state, that we take and divide that number into thirds, and we take 1/3 and we divide that into all of our stabilization accounts. And put it into our reserve. So whatever the dollar amount is that gets certified is then divided into thirds. 1/3 stays in the undesignated fund balance. 1/3 is used towards capital projects, and 1/3 is divided up and put into each of the stabilization accounts.
Thank you. Each of them meaning how many of them do you have?
So the policy up until the council created the climate mitigation account, we had 3 reserves. We had 3 stabilization accounts that were for the general fund. There are 4, of course, for the enterprise funds. And then last year we created the climate mitigation stabilization funds to help us towards our climate goals. So we have 4 now.
Okay. Thank you. I never understood.
Yeah,
how
that's
and
a
it's
good
actually it's actually makes more sense than I imagined.
Yeah. But it is food for thought. Just thinking, I'm so glad we created a climate mitigation stabilization fund, but it is something to think about that it will be divided among, so the more we create, the the less each stabilization fund will get. So that's interesting. That's good to know. Okay. So Heather, were you done? I think she's done.
Yeah, I think so.
Or you had another minute if you wanted to.
No, that's fine. I can think about that now that I know it, and I'll bring a question another time.
Absolutely. Yes, please do. Yeah, I can follow up with you by email too if you think of any more. Okay. Yes.
Councilor Maori, can I follow up on Director Nardi's explanation of how we determine the money that's put into various reserve accounts? Can you, Director Nardi, can you talk about when at what point during the budget process is the the undesignated fund balance certified by the state. So when does the city know what that number is?
So usually that's this time of year, right after the budget, usually around the time that the recap or the tax rate gets set. Then the state certifies our undesignated fund balance, and then generally the mayor brings forward the orders in December or January.
Okay, so that has not yet happened this year.
Correct.
Thanks. Thanks.
This thing. Okay, I'm just doing a little surveillance about any hands. If anyone would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand. And if you're having trouble with that, I don't know if you can show your camera, but you can raise your real hand, but if you can find your virtual hand. I see Karen. Jeff, let me, oh, there. Karen, you should be unmuted. Good evening.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Karen Schiaffo and I live in Florence, and I'm a school nurse at Ryan Road Elementary School. And I appreciated what you just said, Director Nardi, about dividing the funds. But my question is, how do you decide how much needs to be in those funds? Like, is there ever a cap? Like, I don't, like, because you divide your leftover money, but how do you, I guess, yeah, do you ever, like, where does the leftover go?
So it's been pretty straightforward in the past years. So for instance, if we had $900,000 certified in the undesignated fund balance, we would divide that in by 3. So that would be 300,000 for each pot. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I have dogs that are wrestling. I apologize. So for 300,000 would stay in the undesignated fund balance for any emergency that might come up through the year. And then 300,000 would then be divided by 4 now, because we have 4 stabilization accounts. So divide that 300,000 by 4, and you would get that, number. And we put each of that amount, the exact same amount, to each of the stabilizations accounts. And then 300,000 would go towards capital improvement projects.
And so that formula never changes.
It has not in the past year, no. The policy has been to divide it equally.
And what's the determination? Who determines if that changes, and what would be the reason to alter your policy?
So there have been times where the mayor has recommended and the council has moved more free cash later in the year into reserves if there is extra free cash to do so, or undesignated fund balance. So that is on the recommendation of the mayor, voted by the council. But generally speaking, the reason we do it the way we do it is because we have a written policy that we follow as a best practice.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Karen. Our schools are showing up. Let's see. I'm looking for hands. Here. I don't see any hands. I have actually, while I'm looking, giving a minute to see if any hands appear. I'm really, this is a really great conversation about the stabilization funds. And I actually have the question, do they change over time? In other words, have we had stabilization funds with certain missions that do not exist anymore, or is basically have they remained stable? Has there ever been an educational stabilization fund or something like that?
Not that I'm aware of.
I was just curious. Okay. So it was pretty original move of us to make the climate mitigation one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Most communities have similar ones to what we have. Generally a regular stabilization fund and a capital stabilization fund. The fiscal stabilization fund is an unusual one. Not every community I've seen has that. As I said that, or as has been spoken, that was the move of the prior mayor and finance director to help build up the reserves in the city when they were so low 10 years ago. More than 10 years ago, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. All right, I'm just going to take myself. Just going to take another minute, see if we get any more hands. We also have tomorrow night, so we did kind of diffuse over 2 nights because we really wanted to make sure that people, anyone who wanted to participate could. Karen, did you have a follow-up?
I did, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Would it ever make sense, and is this an odd question or query, to ever have an education stabilization fund? Like, would that ever be possible? Since our expenses seem to grow and we're very invested in keeping our schools a quality district, and it's always a problem, and so I don't know if such a thing is done.
Thank you, Karen. Let's just make sure. Let's see. Did you hear that, Director?
I did hear a bit. I think the question was, could there or has there ever been a educational stabilization fund? There hasn't been one in Northampton. I don't know whether there could be. I mean, I just want to remind folks that the stabilization funds is used for non-reoccurring function or things. So it's not to support an ongoing budget, because that's not sustainable. Those funds will eventually run out, and your deficit, or the amount you are covering, is going to be larger each year. So where those funds are going to come eventually, you have to have a source that's filling that bucket all the time. And reserves are not filled by a guaranteed source. So stabilization funds are reserves put away for the use of one-time or emergency needs, not for ongoing budgets. That is one of the reasons that the city has been very careful about making sure that they use their reserves to the best practices, so that we maintain them when we actually need them. So we use them for one-time uses. It is not up to me, and I certainly can't answer the question of could there be one. That's not up to me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Karen. Right. Round. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak? You can raise your hand. Oh, yes, Councilor Nash.
Well, I figured I'd say something to maybe prime the pump here and maybe get a few more responses. That aspirationally, when we came up with this idea of holding it this time of year, this meeting could be like a holiday wish list, and that right now we're talking about margins in the budget and things like that. Are there things that people would like to see, that within the city, which is things you'd like to see the city doing, infrastructure you'd like to see, that, and I recall from last year when people were expressing the ideas. I think it was George Kohout was expressing a desire to see us take better care of the trails, the bike trails, and that, but also he was saying, and I know that the budget's a problem, but this is the intention of this forum is to say, you can think big here, and that's okay. So if anybody got some big ideas out there, now's the time to do it. And they can be little ones too.
Thank you. Thanks for that. That's right. That's right. I remember thinking about the holiday wish list idea around this time. And see, Andrea, because there's, I'm gonna unmute Andrea. There's no one else waiting, so I think we can take another round here. There. Andrea,
I didn't know if I could speak again, but since Councillor Nash gave me a wonderful idea, in a wish list would be, so we recently got solar panels on Ryan Road School, and our school building is creating energy. The wish list I would say for would be to have solar panels on each of our school buildings, and then would be to install mini splits that could be both heating and cooling using that solar energy that's being generated by the schools. I know Ryan Road, one of our teachers' husband does energy audits, and came in and said, you could easily put a mini split in every classroom and have it heated and cooled throughout the year with the solar energy that's being created. And so I think doing that in each building, given that it's not getting any cooler in our schools, and none of them have really well-functioning air conditioning and cooling mechanisms. So that would be a wish list, if that putting solar panels on each of our buildings, and then mini splits that could, in a environmentally friendly way, both heat and cool all the classrooms.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, I will note, I didn't know that until my son did an internship with IT Pathways last summer. And it was a really hot day, and I was like, oh, you get to go be in the air conditioning. He's like, no, I don't. He came out sweating, and I just assumed there was better. Yeah. So I actually, Director Ner, I thought there was a plan that all the schools were going to get solar panels based on a donation from a generous Brian Adams, I believe, or maybe that was another building. Do you know anything about that, Director?
I'm sorry, I don't. I know there's three. I know there was three. I think there's three solar units set up, but I don't know what the plan is for any more.
Yeah, I remember we were discussing it, and I don't remember. I knew that some schools, but I think there was a well, I definitely know there's the desire to have solar panels on every school. So I guess we'll check in with the mayor's office about that one. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Any other kind of comments, ideas, anything else from anyone tonight? You can hang on for just a few minutes to see if anyone comes up with something, and then we'll be here again tomorrow. So, counselors, we are here tomorrow. Do you want to wait a few minutes to see, or do you want to, call it a night? I don't 15. Most people have spoken. Not all. Yes, Counselor Nash.
Yeah, so we posted the meeting to run till 7:30, right? And that, but I think that, minimally, we should keep the meeting open till 7.
Okay.
Maybe the idea is to, we could take a 5-minute recess, 10-minute recess and come back and see if any other people showed up to queue up. Maybe some of the folks in the Zoom will also come up with some ideas while people take a quick break.
Okay. I like that. We'll take a break and then we'll see if anyone joins us. I don't know what happens if someone comes during break, to join the meeting. Should I stay on the meeting? Not leave so that I don't miss. I guess I'll just wait until we get back.
I'm happy to stay here. I wasn't
Okay.
planning on
Oh,
going.
okay. Whatever. So, how long would you all like? You say 5 minutes? Let's say 5 minutes. Unless, yeah. So how about, well, let's be back. All right. Hold on. Actually, let's say till 6:50. Let's get back on. That's 9 minutes because Councilor Labarge is calling. So I'll go talk to her. of 2 budget listening sessions with the Finance Committee. Just a reminder that tomorrow we are also holding a budget listening session, 6 p.m. By Zoom, and you can find that agenda on our city website with the link and the passcode. So we're just checking to see if there's any other hands before we consider adjourning for tonight. I don't see any. See, I'm going to check the time. Yeah, close to 7. So I'm not seeing any hands. Counselor Nash, would you be comfortable if you want to wait a few minutes, or are you comfortable?
I'll offer a motion to adjourn because I'm getting hungry.
Oh, there you go.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we'll do a roll call on adjourning.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Moulton,
Yes.
and Counselor Nash.
Yes.
Okay, we're adjourned, and if anyone missed the chance or couldn't get their hand up, please join us tomorrow at 6 p.m.